It's the kind of news that stops you in your tracks. Wrestling fans around the world woke up to heartbreak on July 24, 2025, the day the immortal Hulk Hogan left us. For decades, his name wasn't just a part of wrestling, it was wrestling. From the red and yellow gear to the "what ya gonna do, brother?" catchphrase, Hogan was larger than life. A man whose charisma and presence shaped the sport forever. Tributes poured in from every corner of the globe. Legends, former rivals, and fans from all generations took to social media to share their memories, their gratitude, and their grief. But among all those voices, one stood out: Bret the Hitman Hart. For years, Bret and Hogan shared a complicated history. They were allies at times, rivals at others, and in some ways, bitter enemies. So when Bret Hart finally broke his silence about Hogan's passing, the wrestling world paid attention. Before we get to Bret's reaction, it's important to remember why his words carry so much weight in this moment. Bret Hart and Hulk Hogan were two of the most iconic figures in WWE history, but they came from very different worlds. Hogan was the flashy, all-American superhero, the face of 1980s wrestling who filled stadiums and took WWE global. Bret was the technician, the ring general, the quiet but intense champion who rose to the top in the post-Hogan era. Their careers intersected in ways that fans still debate today. In 1993, when Hogan briefly returned to WWE after WrestleMania 9, there was tension behind the scenes. Bret was the reigning champion at the time, but Hogan was brought back into the spotlight almost instantly. Many believed Bret was supposed to face Hogan in a passing of the torch match, a symbolic moment to solidify Bret as the new face of WWE. That match never happened. Instead, Hogan won the title from Yokozuna in seconds at WrestleMania 9, held it for a short run, and then dropped it back to Yokozuna before leaving the company again. To this day, Bret has openly said he felt disrespected, believing Hogan didn't want to lose to him. Over the years, he described Hogan as someone who looked out for himself first, even at the expense of others. Those comments created one of the most famous real-life rivalries in wrestling history. So when news broke that Hulk Hogan had passed away, people wondered, would Bret even say anything? Would he offer condolences? Or would old wounds keep him silent? It didn't take long for Bret to post a message. It wasn't long or flowery, but it was powerful. "We had our differences," Bret began, "and we didn't always see eye to eye. But Hulk Hogan was one of the biggest stars this industry will ever know. He brought millions of fans into wrestling, and for that, every wrestler who came after owes him something. My thoughts are with his family today. Rest in peace, Hulk." It was a statement that caught people off guard, not because it was disrespectful, but because it was honest. Bret didn't rewrite history. He didn't pretend their rivalry never happened, but he acknowledged Hogan's place in wrestling's legacy. In a follow-up interview later that day, Bret went deeper. Sitting in his Calgary home, he spoke softly but firmly. "You can't tell the story of wrestling without Hulk Hogan," he said. "We didn't get along in a lot of ways, and there were things he did that I didn't agree with. But the truth is, he was a one-of-a-kind attraction. Nobody could work a crowd like Hulk. Nobody could make a kid in the cheap seats feel like the main event was happening just for them. That was his gift." He paused for a long time before adding, "I wish we had the chance to work that match in '93. I think the fans would have loved it, and maybe we could have closed the book on things differently. Life doesn't always give you those moments back." Hearing Bret speak like that was emotional for longtime fans. This wasn't the hitman delivering one of his sharp, critical shoot interviews. This was a man reflecting on a chapter of his life, aware that time has now closed that door forever. The wrestling world reacted instantly to Bret's comments. Social media lit up with fans sharing clips of the two men's rare interactions in the ring. Many pointed to the 1993 King of the Ring pay-per-view, where Bret won the tournament and Hogan dropped the WWE title earlier that night, as a symbolic passing of eras, even though the two never actually wrestled each other in WWE. Some fans also shared photos from WCW in the late 90s, when Bret and Hogan were briefly part of the same roster. While they didn't have many high-profile matches there either, those images reminded people that, for all their differences, these two icons stood side by side during some of wrestling's biggest moments. Other wrestling legends also weighed in. Ric Flair called Hogan the biggest box office attraction in wrestling history. Steve Austin said, "Without Hulk Hogan, there's no Stone Cold." And The Rock posted a photo of himself shaking Hogan's hand from WrestleMania X8, writing, "Thank you for showing me how to make an arena shake." For Bret Hart, though, the reaction seemed more personal. He admitted in the interview that Hogan's death hit him harder than he expected. "When you've been in the business as long as I have, you lose people. That's part of life. But Hulk was a constant. Even if we weren't talking, even if we weren't friends, he was always there. You always felt like Hogan was part of the wrestling world, and now he's not. It's strange. It feels like the end of an era. Those words resonated with fans who grew up during the 80s and 90s, when wrestling was dominated by larger-than-life characters. Hulk Hogan wasn't just a wrestler, he was a symbol of that time. His red and yellow gear, his poses, his theme music, they were all burned into the memories of millions. In the days following his passing, WWE announced that they would be dedicating the next episode of Raw and SmackDown to Hogan's memory, with tribute videos, interviews, and classic match highlights. They also confirmed that Hogan would be honored at the next Hall of Fame ceremony with a special legacy award, even though he was already a Hall of Famer. Bret Hart said he planned to attend, not to speak, but simply to pay his respects. Sometimes, he said, it's not about what you say, it's about showing up, and for all our history, I think it's important I be there. The reaction from fans to Bret's decision was overwhelmingly positive. Many saw it as a sign of maturity, closure, and respect, proof that even the most bitter rivalries can fade when faced with the reality of loss. And maybe that's the bigger lesson in all of this. Wrestling has always blurred the lines between fiction and reality. Feuds on TV often spill into real life, and real-life tensions sometimes fuel what we see in the ring. But at the end of the day, the people behind those characters share a bond that only they can truly understand. They've all lived through the same grueling travel schedules, the same physical toll, the same highs and lows of performing in front of thousands night after night. Bret Hart and Hulk Hogan will always be linked in wrestling history, not because they had a long rivalry in the ring, but because their careers represent two defining eras. Hogan opened the door to the mainstream in the 80s. Bret kept the flame alive in the 90s. When wrestling needed a new kind of hero, they were different kinds of champions, but both were champions all the same. Now, with Hogan gone, Bret's words feel like the final page in a book that's been open for decades. The rivalries, the grudges, the politics, all of that fades in moments like this. What's left is the respect for someone who gave their life to the business, flaws and all. As fans continue to process the loss, one thing is certain, Hulk Hogan's legacy will live on. Whether you loved him, hated him, or fell somewhere in between, you can't deny his impact. And hearing Bret Hart, one of his most outspoken critics, acknowledge that impact is perhaps the most fitting tribute of all. Rest in peace, Hulk Hogan, and thank you, Bret Hart, for reminding us that even in a world built on rivalries, respect is the one thing that truly lasts.